The lobby of Sterling Financial smelled faintly of rain and marble dust. Katherine Sterling stood at the elevator bank, her arms wrapped tightly around a stack of folders that represented 19 months of relentless work. Outside, lightning tore through the Manhattan sky. Inside, her heels clicked against the wet stone floor where someone had dragged half the storm in with them. She stepped around the puddles without looking down. People like her didn't look down. Then she collided with him, the man she would later follow after work, and into dozens of other thrilling, dangerous twists yet to come. The folders exploded from her grip. Papers scattered across the polished floor, some sliding into a dark puddle spreading from the maintenance closet. Katherine's breath stopped, not from the impact, but from watching her presentation for tomorrow's board meeting dissolve into dirty water. 19 months of work, 19 months of proving she'd earned her father's company, not just inherited it. All of it bleeding ink across cold stone. The man who'd caused it dropped to his knees without a word. He wore a custodian's uniform, navy blue fabric worn thin at the elbows, and moved through the water with hands that didn't shake or fumble. No apology, no panic, just methodical gathering of ruined documents, like he'd done this kind of work his whole life. But his hands told a different story. Katherine noticed them even through her rage. Long fingers, precise movements, the kind of hands that had held something more important than a mop once. Don't. Her voice came out sharp as broken glass. She dropped beside him, yanking a folder from his grasp. Their fingers brushed. She recoiled. "Don't touch my things." He paused, looked up. His eyes were gray, the color of Atlantic storms, and they held hers for exactly 1 second too long. Not defiance, not apology, just calm assessment, like he was measuring something she couldn't see. Katherine stood, clutching wet folders to her chest. Water soaked through her Armani blazer. The man rose too, slower, knees cracking softly in the empty lobby. He had to be 45, maybe older. Lean in a way that spoke of deliberate hunger rather than genetics. His posture was military straight, despite the janitor's uniform. Shoulders back, spine aligned, like someone had trained the slouch out of him decades ago. "You were standing in the walkway," he said. His voice was quiet, textured with something that sounded like education. "I was standing where I always stand." Heat climbed Katherine's throat. 19 months of board members questioning every decision. 19 months of her father's old guard watching her, waiting for her to fail so they could install someone they preferred. And now this, where I have every right to stand. Of course, he bent down again, reaching for his employee badge that had fallen near her shoe. Katherine looked down, finally looked down at this man on his knees, and something cold moved through her chest. The badge lay half submerged in the puddle. His hand reached for it, and before the part of her that had been raised with manners could intervene, her heel came down. Not on the badge, on his hand, not hard enough to break bones, hard enough to pin him there. Hard enough to make him understand. The man went absolutely still. Didn't pull away, didn't cry out, didn't do anything except freeze with his hand trapped beneath her shoe. Those storm gray eyes lifted to meet hers. In them, she saw something worse than fear or anger. She saw pity, the kind of pity a teacher might have for a student who just failed a test they didn't know they were taking. Katherine lifted her foot, reached down and plucked the badge from the water, read the name printed beneath the photo. Leo Castellanos, maintenance, 3rd shift. The photo showed a younger man in a suit, not a uniform, a suit. She looked at him kneeling there, at his wet hand resting on his thigh, at the absolute stillness in his face. "People like you," Katherine said, and her voice dropped to something surgical. "Spend your lives looking at dirt. Floors, stains, the bottom of things." She held his badge between 2 fingers like it contaminated her. "I spend mine looking at numbers with 9 zeros, at decisions that move markets, at the top of the world. She walked to the trash can beside the elevator and dropped the badge in, heard it hit the bottom with a soft thud. "We don't occupy the same world. Don't stand on the same floor with me." She expected him to scramble for the trash can, to beg, to show her the fear that proved she was right about the distance between them. Instead, Leo Castellanos stood slowly, wiped his hand on his uniform pants, looked at the trash can, then at Katherine, and something shifted in his expression. Not defeat, but decision. Like he'd just confirmed something he'd suspected. "You're right," he said quietly. "We don't." Then he turned and walked away. Left the mop bucket, left the caution sign, left his badge in the trash. Walked toward the emergency exit at the far end of the lobby, with the gait of a man who'd walked away from bigger things than this. The door closed behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Katherine stood alone in the empty lobby, wet folders in her arms, and felt something she couldn't name. Not guilt. Not exactly. More like the sensation of having broken something she hadn't known was valuable. She looked at the trash can, at the yellow caution sign reflected in the spreading puddle, at her own distorted reflection in the polished floor. Then she went upstairs and spent the night rebuilding her presentation. But she couldn't stop thinking about his eyes, about the pity in them, about the suit in the badge photo that didn't match the man who mopped floors. At 3 a.m, Katherine went back downstairs. The lobby was empty, the floors dry. Someone had cleaned up the puddle. Someone had moved the mop bucket. The trash can by the elevator had been emptied. She went to the security desk. The night guard, a man in his 60s who'd worked there since her father's time, looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Mr. Harris," Katherine said. "The custodian who works third shift, Leo Castellanos. What do you know about him?" Harris set down his pen. His expression was careful. "Works hard. Keeps to himself." "Why?" "How long has he worked here?" 6 months, maybe. Where did he work before?" Harris studied her face. "Miss Sterling, is there a problem?" "Just curious." "Well," Harris pulled out a logbook, flipped through pages. "Says here he transferred from our downtown office. Before that, I don't know. You'd have to ask HR." Katherine nodded, started to walk away, then stopped. "Harris, in that badge photo, does he look different to you?" The guard glanced at his monitor, pulled up employee records. Leo's face appeared on screen, the same photo from the badge. Younger, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that probably cost more than a custodian made in 3 months. "Yeah," Harris said slowly. "People change, though. Life happens." Katherine went back upstairs, sat at her father's desk, her desk now, and opened her laptop. Searched the employee database for Leo Castellanos. Found the basics. Hired date 6 months ago. Previous position listed as facilities management. No employment history before Sterling Financial. No LinkedIn profile. No digital footprint at all. Like he'd appeared out of nowhere. Or like he'd erased himself deliberately. Katherine thought about her father. About the last year of his life, when he'd grown quieter, more careful. When he'd started working late, keeping files she couldn't access, meeting with people whose names he never mentioned. When he'd looked at her with something like fear in his eyes and said, "Katie, if something happens to me, trust your instincts. Not the board. Not my old friends. Your instincts." 3 weeks later, he'd had a massive heart attack in his office. The autopsy said natural causes, stress, poor diet, the price of building an empire. But Katherine had seen the files he'd been reviewing the night he died, had seen the notes in the margins, the questions he'd been asking, about money transfers, about shell companies, about patterns in the data that didn't make sense. She'd tried to follow up. Mark Davidson, her father's VP of operations, had smoothly redirected her. "Your father was exhausted, Katie, seeing conspiracies where there were only numbers. Let it go. Focus on keeping the company stable." And she had. Because Mark was family. Because the board trusted him. Because 19 months ago she'd been too grief-stunned to fight. Now, staring at Leo Castellanos' empty employee profile, Katherine felt something click into place. A pattern she'd been too close to see. Her father's last words to her, whispered in the hospital before the machines went quiet. I put a failsafe in place. Someone you can trust. When you need him, he'll find you. Katherine closed her laptop, looked at the clock. 4:30 in the morning. Leo's shift would end at 6. In 90 minutes, he'd walk out of this building and disappear into whatever life he'd built in the margins. She had 90 minutes to decide if she was brave enough or desperate enough to follow. At 5:45, Katherine took the elevator down to the parking garage, changed out of her heels and into the running shoes she kept in her car, pulled on a dark jacket, felt ridiculous, felt necessary. At 6:03, Leo emerged from the employee entrance. He carried a military surplus backpack, faded green with careful patches over worn spots. Moved like someone who'd learned to take up minimal space, to pass through crowds without being remembered. Katherine followed. She kept 3 car lengths back as he walked toward the subway station. Had never followed anyone in her life. Had no idea what she was doing, except that stopping felt impossible now. Leo descended into the 23rd Street station. Katherine abandoned her car at a meter, left $20 on the dashboard for whatever ticket she'd get, and hurried down the steps after him. The platform was filling with morning commuters. Leo stood apart from them, back to a pillar covered in peeling concert posters. He checked his phone once, a flip phone, she noticed, not a smartphone. Then put it away and waited. The train came. Katherine boarded a different car, watched through the connecting door windows as Leo took a seat and stared at nothing. No book, no phone, just quiet endurance of the journey. They rode for 38 minutes, changed trains twice. Katherine's feet ached. Her jacket was too warm. None of it mattered. Leo got off in Queens, in a neighborhood where the buildings were older brick, where bodegas had hand-painted signs and laundromats glowed fluorescent in the early light. He walked 4 blocks, turned down an alley between a closed auto shop and a Caribbean restaurant, and entered a building through a metal door. Katherine waited 5 minutes, then approached. The building wasn't residential, not obviously, but up close she could see apartments on the upper floors, air conditioning units jutting from windows, a handwritten directory by the door. No names, just numbers and floor levels. She was about to leave. This was insane. This was illegal. When the door opened and a girl emerged. Maybe 7 years old, purple jacket, light-up sneakers, gray eyes exactly like Leo's, but softer, rounder, still holding childhood. "Hi," the girl said, with the fearless curiosity of children. "Are you lost?" Katherine crouched down to eye level. "Maybe a little. I can help. I'm good at directions." The girl smiled. "I'm Lily. I live on the 3rd floor with my dad." "Your dad?" Katherine stopped, started over. "What's your dad's name?" "Leo." Lily tilted her head. "Do you know him?" Before Katherine could answer, Leo appeared in the doorway. Saw Katherine, went absolutely still. The moment stretched. Morning traffic hummed somewhere distant. A siren wailed and faded. Lily looked between them, sensing something she couldn't name. Finally, Leo said, "Lily, go back upstairs. I'll be there in 5 minutes." "But, please." The girl studied her father's face, then Katherine's. Shrugged and disappeared into the building. The door settled shut. Leo stepped outside, stood 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "You followed me," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "Why?" Katherine pulled the badge from her pocket. She'd retrieved it from the trash after he left. Stood there like an idiot in the empty lobby at 3 in the morning, fishing through coffee grounds and crumpled paper. Found it at the bottom, wiped it clean, kept it. Now she held it out between them. "Because this photo doesn't match who you're pretending to be," she said. "Because you have a daughter and you work a night shift mopping floors, but you move like someone who used to give orders. Because my father told me he put a failsafe in place, someone I could trust, and I think that's you." Leo didn't take the badge. His eyes moved from it to her face and stayed there. "You stepped on my hand last night," he said quietly. "I know. Threw my badge in the trash. Told me I don't belong in your world. I know that too. So what changed?" Katherine's throat was tight. "Nothing changed. I was wrong, and now I need help." The alley was warming with morning sun. Somewhere above them, a window opened and music spilled out. Salsa, turned down low. Leo finally took the badge, turned it over in his hands like it was a key to something Katherine couldn't see. "Come upstairs," he said. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, end of a narrow hallway that smelled like someone's breakfast cooking. Leo unlocked 3 separate locks, deadbolt, chain, something else Katherine didn't recognize, and pushed the door open. Inside was not what Katherine expected. The space was small, maybe 700 square feet. Spartan furniture, a couch that had seen better decades, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, curtains that blocked most of the light. But along one wall, a desk held 3 monitors connected to equipment Katherine recognized from Sterling's IT department. Server racks hummed softly in what should have been a coat closet. Cables ran along baseboards in careful organization. Not the apartment of a custodian, the apartment of someone who needed computing power. Lily sat at the kitchen table, eating cereal and swinging her feet. She looked up when they entered, smiled at Katherine like it was perfectly normal to have strangers follow her father home. "Lily," Leo said, "this is Miss Sterling." "Katherine," Katherine corrected automatically. "Katherine works at the building where I work," Leo continued. "She needs my help with something. We're going to talk in the other room. Can you finish my breakfast and do my reading?" "I know." Lily rolled her eyes with the exasperation of a child who'd heard this before. Adults always need to talk in secret. Leo's expression softened. 20 minutes. Then we'll go to the park before school." He led Katherine into the bedroom, closed the door. The room was even more Spartan than the living area. A mattress on the floor, a single dresser, blackout curtains. But in the corner sat something that made Katherine's breath catch. A suitcase, old leather, monogrammed with initials she recognized. T.S., Theodore Sterling, her father's luggage. Leo saw her staring, opened it without ceremony. Inside were awards, plaques, crystal trophies etched with Wall Street Excellence Awards, certificates from financial publications Katherine subscribed to, all made out to Leo Castellanos, all from 8 to 15 years ago. All recognizing achievements in algorithmic trading, risk assessment, predictive modeling. But they weren't displayed. They were being used as paperweights, holding down stacks of printed code, handwritten notes, data analysis reports. "You were a quantitative analyst," Katherine said slowly. "I was your father's head of algorithm development." Leo knelt beside the suitcase. "We built the risk prediction model that saved Sterling Financial during the '08 crash, the system that made your father a billionaire." He lifted one of the awards, a heavy glass pyramid etched with his name. Used it to hold down a sheaf of papers, covered in mathematical notation. These were supposed to mean something. Now they're just useful. Katherine stared at the awards, at the man kneeling beside them. "Why are you mopping floors?" "Because floors need cleaning, and because nobody looks at the custodian." Leo stood. "Your father and I were developing something new, an algorithm that could predict financial crises before they happened, not just in one company but systemically. We were months away from completion when he died. Heart attack, natural causes." "No." Leo's voice was flat. "Theodore was murdered. I've spent 6 months gathering proof." The room tilted. Katherine sat down hard on the edge of the mattress. That's impossible. The autopsy was influenced by someone with access to the medical examiner's office. Someone with enough power to make a murder look natural. Leo pulled a folder from beneath the awards, opened it. Inside were bank statements, emails, transaction records. Mark Davidson has been embezzling from Sterling Financial for 3 years. Small amounts at first, then larger. He used shell companies and algorithmic trades to hide the transfers. But he made a mistake. He used a modified version of code I wrote. Your father caught it 6 months before he died, was building a case. Katherine's hands were shaking. Why didn't my father go to the police? Because Mark has connections. Police, judges, the SEC. Your father needed ironclad proof, needed to know exactly how deep the corruption went. Leo's expression was grim. The night before he died, Theodore called me, said he'd found something. Said it was bigger than he thought. Said I should disappear for a while, lay low. I told him he was paranoid. Told him we should move forward. His voice cracked slightly. The next morning, he was dead, and you disappeared. I went underground, changed my appearance, took a job where nobody would look twice. Came back 6 months ago as a custodian because I needed access to the building systems. Needed to trace the network traffic. Find where Mark was hiding the transactions. Leo met her eyes. Your father gave me a golden share, a single share of stock with voting rights that override the entire board. Legal, but buried in corporate documents from when Sterling was founded. He said if anything happened to him, I should use it to protect you. Katherine couldn't breathe. Why didn't you contact me before now? Because I wasn't sure you were ready. Wasn't sure you'd believe me. Your father worried you might be too trusting of the board, of his old friends. He wanted you to be tested first. To prove you could stand alone. Leo's expression softened slightly. Last night, when you stepped on my hand, I saw something I needed to see. You were cruel, yes. But you were also afraid, exhausted, fighting to hold on to something that mattered. That's when I knew you were ready. Katherine stood, walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. People heading to work, kids walking to school, the ordinary machinery of life grinding forward, while her world fell apart and reassembled into something she didn't recognize. The board meeting, she said. This morning. Mark is going to make his move. He already has. Leo checked his phone. The flip phone Katherine had noticed earlier. I've been monitoring his communications. He's presenting evidence of financial irregularities this morning. Calling for your immediate resignation. Katherine turned. The evidence is real. I've seen it. Unexplained transfers. Accounts that don't balance. Transfers I made. Leo's voice was steady. Using authorization codes your father gave me before he died. I've been moving money out of Mark's reach into accounts he can't access. It looks like fraud. It's actually preservation. Then we have to explain that to the board. They won't listen. Not to you, not to a custodian. Leo closed the folder. But they might listen to Theodore Sterling's head of algorithm development, to the man who holds a golden share, to someone who can prove Mark Davidson has been stealing from them for 3 years. Katherine looked at him, this man who mopped floors and wrote code and raised a daughter alone and held her father's secrets like they were sacred. You want to go to the board meeting. I want to end this. Leo's eyes were storm gray again, but now Katherine saw what was behind them, not pity, purpose. But it's your choice, your company, your father's legacy. I'm just the failsafe he put in place. Katherine thought about last night, about the cruelty she'd shown, about how Leo had looked at her with pity instead of anger, about how he'd walked away instead of fighting back, about how he'd been testing her too. The meeting starts in 2 hours, she said. I know. I need to make a call. Leo handed her his phone. Katherine stared at it. An ancient flip phone. The kind nobody used anymore, unless they didn't want to be tracked. She dialed the boardroom direct line from memory. Mark answered on the second ring. Davidson. Mark, it's Katherine. I'll be there at 8. And I'm bringing someone. Katherine, if this is some attempt to delay, it's not a delay. It's an explanation. See you in 2 hours. She hung up, handed the phone back to Leo. I need to tell you something, Katherine said quietly. Last night, when I stepped on your hand, when I said those things, I meant them. In that moment, I believed every word. I know. I was wrong. But knowing that doesn't make it not true that I did it. Leo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your father told me you had his temper, his pride, his inability to see people clearly when you were afraid. He met her eyes. He also said you had his courage, his capacity to admit mistakes, his willingness to change when it mattered. So yes, you were cruel, but cruelty isn't permanent unless you choose to make it so. From the other room, Lily called out, Dad, it's been 20 minutes. Leo smiled slightly. She's very precise about time. I can see where she gets that. Katherine moved toward the door, stopped. Leo, why the custodian job? Really? You could have monitored from anywhere. He looked at her for a long moment. Because your father loved this company, built it with his hands and his mind, and someone had to keep it clean while the rats tried to tear it down from inside. He paused. Also, people talk around custodians, say things they wouldn't say around executives. I've learned more mopping floors than I ever did in the boardroom. Katherine nodded. Understood. I'll meet you there, 8 o'clock. Katherine. Leo's voice stopped her at the door. When we walk into that meeting, Mark will try to destroy you. He has documentation. Allies. The moral high ground of someone exposing fraud. You need to be ready for that. I've been ready for 19 months. I just didn't know what I was ready for. She left, took the subway back to Manhattan, went home, showered, changed into her sharpest suit. Tom Ford, black, the one she wore when she needed armor. Put on her highest heels, the ones that made her 6 feet tall and unmissable. At 7:45, she walked into Sterling Financial Tower, rode the elevator to the 43rd floor. The boardroom was glass and steel, and the kind of view that made you forget there was ground beneath you. The board members were already there, 9 of them. 8 men and 1 woman who'd been her father's college roommate, but had voted against Katherine's initiatives 6 times in the past year. None of them met her eyes as she entered. Mark stood at the head of the table, laptop open, slides already loaded. He had silver hair and a tan that came from somewhere expensive. His suit probably cost more than Leo made in 6 months. The thought arrived with bitter clarity. Katherine. Mark's smile was sympathetic, practiced. Thank you for coming. You called a board meeting. I'm the CEO. Where else would I be? Of course. He gestured to her seat. Please. Katherine remained standing. You said I could bring someone. I did, though I'm not sure what help. The boardroom door opened. Leo walked in. He wasn't wearing his custodian uniform. He wore a suit, the same suit from his badge photo, Katherine realized, kept carefully in his apartment for exactly this moment. It fit him perfectly, made him look like what he'd been before he'd learned to be invisible. The room went silent. One of the board members, Richard Chen, her father's oldest friend, stood up slowly, stared at Leo like he was seeing a ghost. Leo Castellanos, Richard said hoarsely. You're dead. We buried you 4 years ago. You buried an empty casket, Leo said calmly. He walked to the table, set down a briefcase Katherine hadn't noticed he was carrying. I've been very much alive, just inconvenient to find. Mark's face had gone pale. This is absurd. You can't just... I hold a golden share in Sterling Financial. Leo opened the briefcase, pulled out a stock certificate, yellowed with age, signed by Theodore Sterling in fountain pen. This share grants me voting authority equal to all board members combined. It's a failsafe Theodore built into the corporate structure in 1974. Never invoked. Until now. Richard reached for the certificate, examined it, looked up with wonder in his face. My God, it's real. Of course it's real. Mark's voice was sharp. But that doesn't give him the right to disrupt. It gives me the right to call a vote of no confidence in the VP of Operations, Leo said quietly, and to present evidence that Mark Davidson has embezzled $14 million from this company over the past 3 years. The room exploded. Board members talked over each other. Mark started to speak. Leo raised one hand, and the room fell silent. Katherine watched, amazed. This was the man who'd mopped floors 8 hours ago, who'd let her step on his hand without fighting back, who'd walked away from her cruelty with dignity and tact. This was the man her father had trusted with everything. Mark, Leo said, the algorithm you used to hide the transfers, the one routing money through shell companies in the Caymans, then back through Hong Kong, then into your personal accounts in Switzerland. Do you want to know how I caught it? Mark said nothing. His jaw was locked tight. Because I wrote it, Leo continued. 10 years ago, as part of a fraud detection system, you stole my code, modified it, used it to steal from the company I helped build. He opened a folder, slid documents across the table. Here are the transfers. Here are the shell companies. Here are the account numbers. He looked at Mark with absolute calm. Did you really think you could use a student's own work to deceive the teacher? Mark stood abruptly. His chair scraped backward. This is a setup. Katherine and this dead man are working together to explain the accounts, Leo said. I don't have to explain anything to. The board might feel differently. Leo's voice was soft, surgical. Especially when the SEC arrives in about 3 minutes. I called them this morning. Gave them everything they need for indictment. As if on cue, the boardroom door opened. 2 men in dark suits, badges visible. Behind them, 2 uniformed police officers. Mark Davidson, one of the suits said, SEC, we have questions about your financial activities. Mark looked at Leo, at Katherine, at the board members who were already shifting away from him, distancing themselves. His expression cycled through emotions, rage, fear, calculation. Then he ran. Made it 3 steps before the police officers caught him. They weren't gentle. One of the board members gasped. Richard Chen looked like he might be sick. Katherine just watched, numb, as they cuffed Mark and read him his rights. The whole thing took 90 seconds. Then Mark was gone, led from the boardroom in handcuffs, and the silence he left behind was absolute. Leo closed his briefcase. The company is stable. The stolen funds have been recovered and placed in escrow. Your accountants will find everything in order. He looked at Katherine. Your CEO has kept this company running through crisis and sabotage. I suggest you support her, or I'll invoke my golden share and replace every one of you. Richard Chen found his voice first. Leo, my God, where have you been? Why did you disappear? Because Theodore asked me to. Because he knew someone would come for him, and he wanted me alive to protect what he'd built. Leo's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for the deception. It was necessary. And now? Richard asked. Now, I go back to my life. Leo picked up his briefcase. Katherine doesn't need a failsafe anymore. She's proven she can lead. Wait. Katherine stood. You're just leaving? After all this? Leo met her eyes. What else is there? You could stay, join the board, take your place as what? A symbol of your father's legacy? Leo shook his head. I prefer the shadows, Katherine. They're quieter. They show you what people are trying to hide. He paused at the door. I'll continue my work, but not in this room. Not in the light. What work? Richard asked. The algorithm Theodore and I were building, the one that predicts systemic financial collapse. It's nearly complete. Leo's expression was unreadable. Someone needs to watch for the next crisis. Might as well be the man nobody notices. He left. Katherine stood frozen, watching the door settle shut. The board members erupted into conversation. Shock, questions, demands for explanation. But Katherine heard none of it. She walked out. Followed Leo to the elevator bank. Caught him as the doors were opening. "Leo, wait!" He turned. Waited. Katherine's throat was tight. "I need to apologize. Properly. For last night. For... You already did." "No, I didn't. I acknowledged it. That's not the same as apologizing." She took a breath. "I was cruel. Because I was afraid. Afraid of failing my father. Afraid of losing the company. Afraid of everyone who was waiting for me to collapse. And you were there. This man I didn't know. This obstacle in my path. And I took everything out on you." Her voice cracked. "You didn't deserve that. Nobody deserves that." Leo was quiet. Then he said, "Your father told me a story once, about you as a child, 8 years old, playing chess. You were losing badly, and you swept the board clean, scattered the pieces, refused to finish the game." He smiled slightly. "Theodore said that was the moment he knew you were his daughter. Because when you were cornered, when you were afraid, you lashed out. Destroyed rather than surrendered. He said his job as your father was to teach you there was a third option. Adaptation. Change. The courage to lose with grace." Katherine's eyes were burning. "Did he succeed? You're standing here apologizing to a man you barely know. A man you humiliated. What do you think?" The elevator dinged. Doors opened. Leo stepped inside. "Come with me," he said. They rode to the roof. Katherine had forgotten there was roof access, a maintenance door her father had insisted on installing when the building was designed. Leo had a key. Of course he had a key. The city spread beneath them, Manhattan in all its brutal glory. The sun was high now, washing everything in hard light. Katherine could see the Empire State Building, the Freedom Tower, the rivers binding the island to the mainland. "Your father used to come up here when he needed to think," Leo said. Said it helped him remember there was a world beyond the boardroom, beyond the numbers. Katherine looked at him. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion in his face, the way he held himself like someone who'd been carrying weight too long. "The daughter. Lily. Is she yours?" Leo's expression shifted. "She's mine in every way that matters. But not biologically. No." He was quiet for a moment. "Her father was a colleague, a friend. He died protecting me from the people who wanted Theodore's algorithm. Lily was 3. I made a promise to raise her, keep her safe, give her the life her father couldn't." He looked at Katherine. "That's why I work nights, why I live small. Every dollar I save goes into a trust for her education, her future, and into finishing the work Theodore and I started. Does she know about what you do? She knows I loved her father, that I'm trying to make the world a little safer for her. That's enough for now." Leo pulled something from his pocket, a wrapped candy, strawberry-flavored, from the red wrapper. "She gives me one every morning before school. Says it's for luck." He held it out to Katherine. "Maybe you need some luck, too." Katherine took the candy, felt the weight of it in her palm. Small, ridiculous, meaningful beyond words. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "About people like you. About what matters. You weren't wrong. You were afraid. There's a difference." Leo turned to look at the city. "Your father taught me something important. He said the worst thing about power isn't that it corrupts. It's that it isolates. Makes you forget that the person mopping your floor, serving your coffee, cleaning your office, they're not NPCs in your story. They're the story. The whole story." He glanced at her. "You forgot that for a moment. But you remembered. That's what matters. What happens now, Katherine asked. Now you go back downstairs. Run your company. Be the leader your father knew you could be. Leo's expression was calm. And I go back to the shadows. Continue my work. Raise Lily. Keep the floors clean. You're really going to keep mopping floors? Someone has to. And like I said, people talk around custodians. He smiled slightly. Besides, Lily likes the night shift. Says I'm home when she wakes up for school. Can't argue with that. Katherine looked at the candy in her hand, at this man who'd saved her company, exposed a traitor, and wanted nothing except to disappear back into invisibility. Leo, she said, thank you. Don't thank me. Just be better. That's all Theodore wanted. For you to be better than he was. Kinder. Wiser. Less alone. Leo moved toward the roof door. And Katherine, next time you meet someone who cleans floors or serves coffee or stands in your way, remember they might be the failsafe you need, the teacher you don't recognize, the grace you don't deserve but desperately need. He left. Katherine stood alone on the roof, holding a strawberry candy, watching the city breathe and move and live below her. She thought about last night, about cruelty and fear and the distance she'd created between herself and the world, about a man who'd let her step on his hand because he was testing her character, about a little girl who gave her father candy for luck, about her father who'd loved her enough to put a failsafe in place, who'd trusted Leo Castellanos with everything, who'd believed, even at the end, that she could become someone worthy of the empire he'd built. Katherine unwrapped the candy, put it in her mouth. Strawberry sweetness flooded her senses, bright and simple and real. Then she went downstairs and got to work. 3 months later, Sterling Financial announced record profits. The board voted unanimously to grant Katherine a new 5-year contract as CEO. Mark Davidson pled guilty to 14 counts of fraud and was sentenced to 18 years. And every night, at precisely 11:15, Katherine would see a custodian on the security monitors, mopping floors, checking systems, moving through the building like a ghost. She never approached him, never interrupted his work. But sometimes she left things for him to find. A cup of coffee on his cart. A bonus check made out to Leo Castellanos, custodial staff, marked essential services. A note that said simply, "Thank you." The notes were always gone by morning. The coffee was always drunk. The checks were always cashed and, according to HR, donated to a scholarship fund for children of deceased first responders. Katherine learned to look at people differently, learned their names, asked about their lives, discovered that the woman who brought her mail had a daughter in medical school, that the security guard was writing a novel, that the lunch cart vendor outside the building was a former accountant who'd lost everything in the financial crisis and was rebuilding, one sandwich at a time. She learned that her father's empire had been built on numbers, but it ran on people. And that power without grace was just cruelty with a better suit. On the anniversary of her father's death, Katherine went back to the roof, found Leo already there, standing at the edge, looking at the sunset. "You knew I'd come," she said. Seemed likely. He didn't turn. 1 year. How does it feel? Like I'm finally doing the job instead of just holding it. Katherine joined him at the railing. "The algorithm, the one you and my father were building, is it finished?" "Last month. I've been beta testing it with a few select institutions. It works. Not perfectly, but well enough to give warning before the next collapse. And when the next collapse comes, we'll be ready. People will still lose money. Markets will still crash. But maybe fewer families will lose everything. Maybe fewer people will end up pushing lunch carts when they used to balance spreadsheets." Leo finally looked at her. "Your father wanted to save the world. I just want to save some people in it." Katherine reached into her pocket, pulled out a strawberry candy. "Lily's still giving you these." Leo's expression softened. Every morning. She's very consistent. Good. Katherine handed it to him. I bought a bag, figured I should return the favor. They stood in silence as the sun sank below the skyline, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Below them, millions of people were finishing their days, heading home, making dinner, helping with homework, living lives that Katherine used to think were beneath her notice. Now she saw them clearly, saw the man mopping floors and the CEO signing contracts, and understood they were playing the same game, just on different squares. That dignity didn't come from titles, or money, or power. It came from showing up, from doing the work, from raising a daughter on night shift wages, and still having grace left over for the people who didn't deserve it. Leo, Katherine said quietly, I'm sorry. For that night. For what I did. For who I was. I know. Does Lily know? What happened? She knows I met a woman who was unkind, who learned to be kind. That's all she needs to know. Leo unwrapped the candy Katherine had given him. She asked if you were my friend. I said, maybe. Someday. And now? Leo smiled slightly. Now I'd say yes. You're my friend. The kind who apologizes. The kind who changes. The kind worth Theodore's faith. Katherine felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been knotted tight for 19 months. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep being better. Leo looked at her seriously. And Katherine, if you ever step on someone's hand again, literally or figuratively, remember this feeling. Remember that grace isn't about being perfect. It's about recognizing when you're not. And choosing differently next time. He left her there on the roof, holding her own strawberry candy, watching the lights come on across the city like stars, falling upward into the gathering dark. Katherine stayed until full night. Then she went downstairs, past Leo in the lobby, working on the floors. Their eyes met. She nodded. He nodded back. No words, just understanding. And that, Katherine thought, was worth more than all the power in the world.